There's a theater that never closes. Its stage is everywhere. In boardrooms and bedrooms, in family dinners and political debates, in the quiet moments between lovers and the loud arguments between enemies. The actors never remove their costumes because the costumes have become their skin. And the most dangerous performers are not those who display their strength openly, but those who have mastered the art of appearing weak. Watch closely. In the corner of a corporate office, a woman sits with her shoulders slightly hunched, her voice soft, almost apologetic. She asks questions as if she doesn't already know the answers. She defers others, lets them speak first, nods at what appears to be genuine uncertainty. Her colleagues see her as harmless, perhaps even incompetent. They underestimate her, and that is precisely her weapon. Within 6 months, she will have gathered every secret, every weakness, every hidden ambition in that office. She will know who is sleeping with whom, who is stealing, who is afraid, who is desperate. And when the moment arrives, when the position opens or the crisis hits, she will strike with the precision of a surgeon and the ruthlessness of a general. No one will see it coming because they never saw her at all. This is not a story about evil. This is a story about survival in a world that punishes the honest and rewards the cunning. This is about the masks we wear and the price we pay for wearing them. This is about you and me and everyone who has ever pretended to be less than they are in order to become more than they were allowed to be. Before we continue, a warning. The knowledge that's about to be shared cannot be unlearned. It will permanently change the way you see human relationships. If you're ready to abandon comfortable illusions and see what's behind the stage, subscribe now, because this isn't just a video. It's the beginning of your journey under the mask. Now, let us begin. The psychology of feigned weakness is as old as human civilization itself. In ancient China, Sun Tzu wrote that all warfare is based on deception, that when you are strong, you must appear weak, and when you are weak, you must appear strong. But he was not writing about military strategy alone. He was writing about the fundamental architecture of human interaction, the invisible rules that govern every relationship, every negotiation, every moment when two human beings meet and silently ask themselves who has the power and who does not. Power is not what we think it is. We imagine power as loud, as visible, as the raised fist or commanding voice. We picture the dictator on the balcony, the CEO in the corner office, the parent who rules through fear. But this is the amateur's understanding of power. True power whispers. True power hides. True power wears a mask of weakness because weakness is the perfect disguise in a world that has been taught to attack strength and protect vulnerability. Consider the child who learns early that tears bring comfort, that helplessness summons aid, that appearing small makes the adults feel large and generous. This child is not consciously manipulating, not at first, but the pattern is established. The neural pathways form. The brain learns that vulnerability is currency, that weakness purchases protection, that the appearance of need creates obligation in others. And as this child grows, the strategy becomes more sophisticated, more deliberate, more effective. By adulthood, it is no longer strategy at all. It has become identity. The mask is fused with the face. Walk into any room where power is being negotiated, and you will see this dance. The job interview where the candidate plays humble, downplays their achievements, asks for guidance even though they could do the job in their sleep. They are not being modest. They are being strategic. Because the interviewer needs to feel superior, needs to feel like the giver of opportunity, needs to believe they are discovering hidden talent rather than being sold to. The candidate who comes in too strong, too confident, too aware of their own value, threatens this narrative. They make the interviewer feel small. And people do not hire those who make them feel small. They hire those who make them feel powerful. Or watch the romantic relationship in its early stages. One partner consistently positions themselves as slightly less interested, slightly more damaged, slightly more in need of patience and understanding. They cancel plans at the last minute. They are vague about their feelings. They share stories of past hurts that explain why they cannot fully commit. And the other partner, the one who believes themselves to be strong and stable and capable of love, leans in harder. They pursue, they prove, they work to earn what should be freely given. And in this dynamic, who truly has the power? The one who chases or the one who runs? The one who gives or the one who withholds? The mask of emotional weakness has created a structure where the seemingly vulnerable partner controls every aspect of the relationship's pace, depth, and direction. This is a paradox that most people never understand. Strength that announces itself creates resistance. It activates the competitive instinct in others. It makes people want to test you, challenge you, diminish you. But weakness that presents itself creates compassion or contempt or the desire to help. And all three of these responses give the apparently weak person something valuable. Compassion gives them allies. Contempt makes others underestimate them. The desire to help puts others in their service. The person who appears weak is never the target. They are overlooked, dismissed, considered harmless. And from this position of invisibility, they can observe everything, learn everything, and strike when no one is watching. But let us go deeper. Let us examine the internal experience of the person who wears this mask. Because this is not a simple story of villains and victims. This is a story of human complexity, of adaptation and survival, of the terrible choices we make when the world does not allow us to be both authentic and safe. Imagine a young man growing up in a household where displays of strength were met with violence. His father, insecure and threatened by any challenge to his authority, would respond to confidence with cruelty. The boy learned quickly that to show capability was to invite punishment. To excel was to be cut down. To have an opinion was to be silenced with force. And so he learned to hide. He learned to play dumb, to ask for help he didn't need, to present himself as less competent than he was. This was not manipulation. This was survival. The mask was not chosen. It was forced upon him by an environment that punished authenticity. But here is where the story becomes darker. Years pass. The father is gone. The young man is now an adult in a world that would not punish his competence, that might even reward it. But the mask remains. It has become comfortable. More than comfortable, it has become useful. He has discovered that people trust the seemingly weak. They confide in them. They underestimate them. And he has learned to use this. In his workplace, he plays the role of the struggling employee who needs mentorship. His managers invest time in him, share insider knowledge, advocate for him. Meanwhile, he is documenting everything, building relationships with their superiors, positioning himself for the moment where he can leap over them. The mask that began as protection has become a weapon, and he tells himself that this is justice, that he is simply playing the game, that everyone does it. But late at night, when he is alone with his thoughts, he feels the weight of it, the exhaustion of never being seen, the loneliness of never being known, the creeping fear that he has worn the mask so long that there is nothing underneath it anymore. This is the cost that no one discusses. The person who fakes weakness to gain power pays a price that cannot be calculated in any ledger. They pay with their identity. They pay with their relationships. They pay with the possibility of genuine connection. Because how can you be truly known when you are always performing? How can you be truly loved when the person others love is a character you invented? How can you trust anyone when you yourself are fundamentally untrustworthy? Carl Jung wrote about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we hide because they are unacceptable to our conscious identity. But what happens when the shadow becomes a mask we show the world, and our true strength becomes a secret we hide? This is the inverse of the typical psychological journey. Most people hide their darkness and show their light, but the person who fakes weakness hides their light and shows a carefully crafted darkness, a strategic vulnerability that is itself a form of manipulation. Let us examine a specific case. A woman in her 30s, successful by any external measure. She runs a nonprofit organization, speaks at conferences, is admired by many, but in her personal relationships, she is a different person entirely. With her romantic partners, she is perpetually on the edge of crisis. There's always a health scare, a family emergency, a financial disaster, a mental health struggle. And these crises are real enough. She does experience anxiety. She does have complicated family relationships. She does struggle with money despite her professional success. But watch closely, and you will see the pattern. The crises always escalate at specific moments. When a partner begins to pull away, when they start to assert their own needs, when the relationship threatens to become balanced, rather than centered on her needs. At these moments, a new crisis emerges, and the partner, feeling guilty for even thinking of themselves, rushes back to support her. The relationship recenters. The power dynamic reestablishes itself, and she is safe again, needed again, in control again. Ask her if she is manipulating, and she will be genuinely offended. She experiences her crises as real. She feels her anxiety as authentic. She is not lying about her struggles, but she has learned, perhaps without ever consciously acknowledging it, to weaponize her vulnerability. She has learned that her weakness is her strength, that her needs are her power, that her crises are her control. And the most terrifying part is that she may never fully recognize this pattern, because to recognize it would be to lose it. To see the mask would be to destroy its effectiveness. And so she remains in a state of strategic unconsciousness, aware enough to deploy her vulnerability at the right moments, but unaware enough to maintain her self-image as a victim rather than a manipulator. This is the genius and the tragedy of feigned weakness. It often operates below the level of conscious awareness. The person wielding it can genuinely believe in their own helplessness, even as they use that helplessness to control others. They can feel authentic emotion, even as they perform that emotion for effect. They can be both victim and villain, both manipulated and manipulator, both sincere and strategic. The human mind is capable of holding these contradictions without collapsing. In fact, it excels at it. We are all unreliable narrators of our own stories, but the person who fakes weakness has turned this unreliability into an art form. Now let us shift our perspective. Let us look at the other side of this dynamic, because every mask requires an audience. Every performance requires someone willing to watch and believe. The person who fakes weakness cannot succeed without the person who needs to feel strong. And this is where psychology becomes truly complex, because the enabler is not simply a victim. They are a participant. They are getting something from this dynamic too. Consider the partner who stays with someone who is perpetually in crisis. On the surface, they appear to be selfless, patient, endlessly giving. They complain to their friends about how hard it is, how much they sacrifice, how they wish their partner would just get better. But watch what happens when their partner actually starts to improve. Watch what happens when the crises begin to resolve, when the weak partner starts to show strength and independence. Does the supposedly supportive partner celebrate? Sometimes, but often, subtly, they begin to undermine. They remind their partner of past failures. They express skepticism about the improvement. They create new problems or resurrect old ones, because their identity is built on being the strong one, the helper, the savior. If their partner becomes strong, who are they? What is their role? What is their value? This is the unspoken contract at the heart of many relationships. One person agrees to be weak, so the other can feel strong. One person agrees to need, so the other can feel needed. One person agrees to fail, so the other can feel successful. And both parties enforce this contract, often without ever speaking aloud, because both parties need it. The person who fakes weakness gets protection, resources, and control. The person who plays strong gets purpose, superiority, and the comfortable illusion that they're the powerful one in the relationship. But who truly has the power in this arrangement? The question is more complicated than it appears. On one level, the person who fakes weakness has tactical power. They control the emotional temperature of the relationship. They determine when crises happen and when they resolve. They can summon attention and resources at will. But on another level, they are trapped. They cannot ever show their true strength without destroying the relationship. They cannot ever be fully seen without losing their advantage. They are powerful, yes, but they are powerful only as long as they remain in their cage. The moment they step out, the moment they reveal themselves, the dynamic collapses, and the supposedly strong partner, they have the power of choice. They could leave. They could refuse to play the game. They could demand authenticity and reciprocity. But they don't, because they too are trapped not by external circumstances, but by their own psychological needs. They need to be needed. They need to feel superior. They need the drama and the crisis because it gives their life meaning and their identity structure. Without someone to save, who are they? Just another person ordinary and unremarkable, with no special role to play. This is the terrible symmetry of the dynamic. Both parties are using each other. Both parties are lying to each other and to themselves. Both parties are wearing masks. The only difference is that one mask says I am weak and the other says I am strong. But both masks hide the same truth, which is that both people are afraid, both people are manipulating, both people are desperate for connection, but terrified of the vulnerability that real connection requires. Let's examine this dynamic in a different context. The workplace. Here the masks become even more sophisticated because the stakes are different. In personal relationships, the currency is love and attention. In professional relationships, the currency is money, status, and power. And the person who has mastered the art of strategic weakness can extract all three. Picture a team meeting. A project has failed. The manager is looking for someone to blame. In the room are two employees. The first is competent, confident, and has been vocal about concerns regarding the project from the beginning. The second has been quiet, deferential, always agreeing with the manager's decisions, even when those decisions were clearly flawed. Who does the manager blame? Logic would suggest the first employee should be safe. They raise concerns. They tried to prevent the failure. But logic does not govern human behavior. Ego does. And the manager's ego cannot tolerate the first employee's "I told you so," even if it's unspoken. That employee's competence is a threat, a reminder of the manager's failure. But the second employee, they are safe. They never challenged. They never made the manager feel small. And so the manager protects them, even though they contributed nothing, even though their silence enabled the failure. The weak employee survives. The strong employee is sacrificed. This pattern repeats across every level of every organization. The person who asks obvious questions in meetings, who admits confusion even when they understand perfectly, who requests help and guidance and mentorship, is seen as humble, as teachable, as a team player. Meanwhile, the person who comes prepared with solutions, who demonstrates expertise, who works independently, is seen as arrogant, as a know-it-all, as someone who doesn't value collaboration. The language of corporate culture has been carefully designed to punish competence and reward the performance of incompetence. We call it humility. We call it being coachable. We call it emotional intelligence. But what we are really rewarding is the willingness to make others feel superior, to play small, so that managers and leaders can feel large. And the person who understands this, who has truly internalized this lesson, rises, not through excellence, but through the appearance of grateful mediocrity. They ask their boss for advice on things they already know. They credit others for their ideas. They express uncertainty about their own judgment. And their boss feels wise, feels generous, feels like a mentor and a leader. And when promotion time comes, who does the boss advocate for? The brilliant employee who makes them feel inadequate? Or the seemingly struggling employee who makes them feel like a genius? The answer is obvious. The mask of weakness has purchased advancement that competence alone could never achieve. But let us not mistake this for a simple story of workplace politics. This is deeper. This is about the fundamental human need for hierarchy and the psychological comfort of feeling superior to others. We are a species that organizes itself into dominant structures. We cannot help it. It is written into our evolutionary code. And in these structures, the person at the top needs those below them to acknowledge their position. The king needs subjects who bow. The boss needs employees who defer. The parent needs children who obey. And the person who refuses to bow, who refuses to defer, who refuses to obey, is not seen as strong. They are seen as a threat, and threats are eliminated. So the intelligent person learns to bow while standing upright. They learn to defer while maintaining their own agenda. They learn to obey while secretly ruling. They wear the mask of weakness not because they are weak, but because they understand that visible strength is punished and hidden strength is rewarded. They have learned what Machiavelli knew 500 years ago, that it is better to be feared than loved, but it is better still to be underestimated, because a person who is feared is always in danger. Someone will eventually challenge them. Someone will eventually try to take them down. But the person who is underestimated, they are safe. They are invisible. They can move through the world gathering power without anyone noticing until it is too late. Now we must ask the question that makes everyone uncomfortable. Is this wrong Is the person who fakes weakness to gain power acting immorally? Or are they simply playing the game that society has created, using the only tools available to them in a world that punishes authenticity and rewards performance? The answer depends on your moral framework. If you believe in absolute ethics, in universal rules of right and wrong, then yes, manipulation is wrong regardless of context. Deception is wrong. Using others as means to your ends is wrong. The person who fakes weakness is lying, and lying is a moral violation. But if you believe in situational ethics and survival, and the idea that morality is a luxury afforded only to those with power, then the calculation becomes more complex. Is it wrong for the employee to fake incompetence when genuine competence would get them fired? Is it wrong for the abuse survivor to fake weakness when showing strength would invite violence? Is it wrong for the marginalized person to use the only weapon society has left them, which is the appearance of harmlessness? These are not rhetorical questions. They are the questions that every person who wears this mask must answer for themselves, usually in the dark hours of the night when performance is over and they are alone with their conscience. And the answers are never simple, because most people who fake weakness are not cartoon villains. They are not rubbing their hands together and cackling about their evil plans. They are tired. They are scared. They are doing what they believe they must do to survive in a world that has taught them, through painful experience, that authenticity is dangerous and vulnerability is a weapon that will be used against them unless they learn to wield it first. But here's the trap. The mask that protects you also imprisons you. The strategy that helps you survive also prevents you from truly living. Because every moment you spend performing weakness is a moment you are not experiencing your own strength. Every relationship you build on deception is a relationship that cannot nourish your authentic self. Every victory you achieve through manipulation is a victory that confirms your belief that you cannot succeed by being real. The mask becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You wear it because you believe the world will not accept your true self. And because you wear it, you never test that belief. You never discover whether the world might actually embrace your strength, your competence, your authentic power. You remain forever in the prison of your own strategy, safe but alone, powerful but empty. And the cost compounds over time. The person who fakes weakness in their 20s may find it effective. They get jobs, relationships, opportunities. But in their 30s, the mask starts to chafe. They feel the exhaustion of constant performance. They long to be seen, to be known, to drop the act. But they cannot. Too much is built on the foundation of the lie. Their career, their relationships, their entire identity is constructed around the mask. To remove it now would be to lose everything. And so they continue, year after year, decade after decade, until they can no longer remember what their real face looks like. Until the mask has become the face. Until there is no difference anymore between the performance and the person. This is the ultimate tragedy of strategic weakness. It works. That is the problem. It works so well that it becomes impossible to abandon. The person who discovers this strategy discovers a kind of superpower. They can get what they want. They can protect themselves. They can control situations and people. And this success reinforces a behavior, makes it stronger, makes it more automatic, until it is no longer a choice but reflex. They cannot turn it off even when they want to, even when they are with people who might actually accept their strength, who might actually love their authentic self. The mask remains, because the mask is no longer something they wear. It is something they are. Let us examine the neuroscience of this for a moment. The human brain is a pattern recognition machine. It learns through repetition. When a behavior is rewarded, the neural pathways associated with that behavior are strengthened. When a behavior is punished, those pathways are weakened. The person who fakes weakness and is rewarded for it, who receives protection, resources, attention, and power, is literally rewiring their brain. The pathways associated with strategic vulnerability become superhighways. The pathways associated with authentic strength atrophy from disuse. Over time, the brain becomes optimized for manipulation. It happens automatically, below the level of conscious thought. The person no longer needs to decide to fake weakness. Their brain does it for them. It has become their default mode of operating in the world. And here is where it becomes truly disturbing. Because if the behavior is automatic, if it is neurologically embedded, can we even call it manipulation anymore? Or has it become something else? Has it become identity? The person who consciously chooses to deceive is a manipulator. But what do we call the person who has deceived so long and so consistently that deception has become their truth? What we call the person who genuinely experiences themselves as weak even as they wield tremendous power? What do we call the person who has forgotten they're wearing a mask? This is a question that keeps psychologists awake at night because it challenges our fundamental assumptions about human nature, about consciousness, about the relationship between who we are and who we pretend to be. We like to believe there's a core self, an authentic identity beneath all the masks and performances. But what if there isn't? What if we are nothing but the sum of our performances? What if the mask is all there is? Jung believed that integration was possible, that we could bring our shadow into consciousness and become whole. But Jung was writing about people who hide their darkness and show their light. What about the person who hides their light and shows their darkness? What about the person whose shadow is not their cruelty but their competence, not their weakness but their strength? Can they integrate? Can they become whole? Or are they doomed to remain fragmented, forever split between the powerful person they are and the weak person they pretend to be? The answer may lie in understanding the difference between strategic weakness and genuine vulnerability. Strategic weakness is a performance. It is calculated. It is deployed for effect. It is a tool used to manipulate others. But genuine vulnerability is something else entirely. It is the willingness to be seen as you actually are, with all your flaws and fears and uncertainties. It is the courage to show up without armor, without strategy, without knowing how others will respond. And here is the paradox that changes everything. Genuine vulnerability is actually a form of strength. It takes tremendous courage to be truly vulnerable. It requires self-awareness, emotional maturity, and a willingness to risk rejection. The person who can be genuinely vulnerable is demonstrating a kind of power that the person who fakes weakness can never access. Because genuine vulnerability creates real connection. It invites others to be authentic in return. It builds relationships based on truth rather than manipulation. And these relationships, while riskier, are also deeper, more nourishing, more real. But the person who has spent years or decades faking weakness cannot easily access genuine vulnerability. They have trained themselves to see vulnerability as a weapon, as a tool, as a means to an end. They cannot simply decide to be authentic. The neural pathways are too strong. The habits are too ingrained. The fear is too deep. They would need to unlearn everything they have learned, to rewire their entire brain, to rebuild their identity from the ground up. And most people are not willing or able to do that work. It is too hard, too scary, too uncertain. And so they remain trapped in their pattern, powerful but alone, successful but empty, winning every battle but losing the war for their own soul. Now, let us look at the cultural dimension of this phenomenon. Because the strategy of feigned weakness does not exist in a vacuum. It is shaped by culture, by history, by the specific power dynamics of society in which it occurs. And in contemporary Western culture, particularly American culture, we are living through a fascinating and disturbing moment where strategic weakness has become not just accepted but celebrated. We live in what some scholars call a victimhood culture, where moral status is derived not from strength or virtue, but from oppression and suffering. In this culture, the person who can claim the most victimization has the most moral authority. They cannot be questioned. They cannot be criticized. Their perspective is automatically privileged. And this creates a perverse incentive structure where people compete to be seen as the most oppressed, the most marginalized, the most vulnerable. Because vulnerability has become currency. It purchases attention, resources, protection, and power. This is not to say that real oppression does not exist. It does. And real victims deserve support and justice. But the cultural elevation of victimhood has created an environment where faking weakness is not just effective, but socially rewarded. The person who claims to be triggered, traumatized, or harmed by words or ideas can shut down conversations, get people fired, reshape institutional policies. The person who positions themselves as vulnerable can weaponize that vulnerability against anyone who challenges them. And the most sophisticated operators understand this. They have learned to speak the language of social justice, of trauma, of marginalization, not because they believe in these concepts, but because they recognize them as tools of power. Watch how this plays out in universities, in corporations, in online spaces. Someone makes a statement. Someone else claims that statement has harmed them, has made them feel unsafe, has triggered their trauma. And immediately, the conversation shifts. It is no longer about the truth or falsity of the original statement. It is about the feelings of the person claiming harm. And those feelings cannot be questioned. To question them is to commit a second harm, to engage in victim blaming, to reveal yourself as insensitive or oppressive. The person claiming vulnerability has effectively ended the conversation and positioned themselves as morally superior. They have won without having to engage with ideas, without having to defend their position, without having to be strong. They have won by being weak, or rather, by performing weakness so effectively that others cannot distinguish it from genuine suffering. This is strategic weakness at the cultural level, and it is extraordinarily effective. But it is also extraordinarily corrosive, because when victimhood becomes currency, people will counterfeit it. When weakness becomes power, people will fake weakness. And when enough people are faking, it becomes impossible to distinguish real suffering from performed suffering. The person who is genuinely traumatized gets lost in the noise of people claiming trauma for strategic purposes. The person who is genuinely marginalized finds their experience appropriated by those seeking advantage. And the entire culture becomes a theater of competing performances, where everyone is claiming to be a victim and no one is taking responsibility for anything. But let's return to the individual level, because cultural analysis, while important, can become abstract. And this is not an abstract issue. This is about real people making real choices with real consequences. So let's tell another story. Let's examine a specific case that illustrates the full complexity of this phenomenon. There is a man. Let us call him David. David grew up poor, the son of immigrants, in a neighborhood where showing weakness meant getting beaten or robbed. He learned early to project strength, to never back down, to fight when challenged. This served him well as a child. He survived. But when he got to college on a scholarship, he discovered that the rules were different. The aggressive posturing that protected him in his neighborhood made him threatening to his classmates and professors. He was seen as angry, as dangerous, as someone to be feared and avoided. His grades suffered not because he was intelligent, but because professors were uncomfortable with him. He wasn't getting the mentorship and opportunities that other students received. He was being quietly pushed out. And then he met a professor who took him aside and explained the game. "You are playing by the wrong rules," the professor said. "In this world, strength is a liability. You need to learn to play weak. You need to ask for help. You need to show vulnerability. You need to make people feel safe around you, which means making them feel superior to you." David was offended at first. He had worked so hard to become strong, to never need anyone, to stand on his own. But he was also pragmatic. He wanted to succeed. And so he tried it. He started going to office hours and asking basic questions he already knew the answers to. He started expressing uncertainty about his work. He started thanking professors effusively for their guidance. And it worked. Suddenly, professors were invested in him. They saw him as a success story, a rough diamond they were polishing. They wrote him recommendations. They connected him with opportunities. They advocated for him. And David graduated with honors and got into a top graduate program. But something happened to David in the process. The mask he put on as a strategy started to feel real. He found himself actually feeling uncertain, actually needing the validation of authority figures, actually doubting his own competence. The performance had seeped into his psyche. And by the time he finished his PhD and started his career, he could no longer tell where the performance ended and his real self began. He had become the mask. The strong, self-reliant person he used to be was gone, replaced by someone who was successful, yes, but also dependent, insecure, always seeking approval, always performing vulnerability to maintain his position. Was this a tragedy? David would say no. He would say he did what he had to do to survive and succeed in a system that was not designed for people like him. He would say the mask was a tool, a necessary adaptation, and that he has no regrets. But late at night, when he cannot sleep, he sometimes remembers who he used to be, the boy who was afraid of nothing, the young man who stood on his own, and he wonders what happened to that person. He wonders if that person is still in there somewhere, or the mask consumed him entirely. He wonders if he won or if he lost. He wonders if there is even a difference. This is the ambiguity at the heart of strategic weakness. It is both empowering and destructive. It is both a tool of survival and a form of self-betrayal. It allows people to succeed in systems that would otherwise exclude them, but also requires them to hide their true selves, to perform a version of themselves that others find acceptable, to trade authenticity for advancement. And the question of whether this trade is worth it cannot be answered universally. It depends on the person. It depends on the context. It depends on what you value more, success or integrity, power or authenticity, winning the game or refusing to play. But here is what we can say with certainty. The game is real. The dynamics we have been discussing are not theoretical. They are happening right now in every workplace, every relationship, every social interaction. People are wearing masks. People are faking weakness to gain power. People are manipulating and being manipulated. And most of it is happening below the level of conscious awareness. Most people do not think of themselves as manipulators. They think of themselves as survivors, as pragmatists, as people doing what they need to do to get by. And maybe they are right. Maybe in a world that punishes authenticity and rewards performance, the person who refuses to wear a mask is not noble but naive. Maybe the person who insists on being genuine is not brave but foolish. Maybe the only way to survive is to learn to lie, to yourself and to others, until the lies become truth and the truth becomes irrelevant. Or maybe not. Maybe there is another way. Maybe it is possible to be both authentic and successful, both vulnerable and powerful, both genuine and strategic. Maybe the answer is not to refuse the mask entirely, but to learn when to wear it and when to remove it. To understand that there are times when strategic weakness is necessary, when playing small is a smart move, when hiding your strength is a path to survival, but also to understand that the mask is a tool, not an identity, that you can put it on without becoming it, that you can play the game without losing yourself in the process. This requires a level of self-awareness that most people never achieve. It requires the ability to observe yourself, to recognize when you're performing and when you are being real, to maintain a core sense of self even as you adapt to different contexts and audiences. It requires what psychologists call ego strength, the ability to have a stable identity that is not dependent on external validation or the approval of others. And it requires courage, because the person who maintains their authentic self while navigating a world that rewards performance is constantly at risk. They risk being seen as difficult, as uncooperative, as not a team player. They risk losing opportunities, relationships, advancement. They risk being punished for their refusal to play the game the way everyone else plays it. But they also gain something that the person who fully commits to the mask can never have. They gain the possibility of genuine connection. They gain the experience of being truly seen and truly known. They gain the integrity that comes from alignment between who you are and who you present yourself to be. And they gain the freedom that comes from not being trapped in performance, from not having to remember which version of yourself you showed to which person, from not having to maintain an exhausting web of lies and half-truths and strategic omissions. Is this worth it? Again, the answer depends on what you value. But consider this. At the end of your life, when you look back, what will matter more? That you successfully manipulated your way to success, or that you lived authentically, that you were known and loved for who you actually were, that you did not betray yourself in pursuit of external validation? These are the questions that the person who wears the mask of weakness must eventually confront. And the longer they wait, the harder those questions become to answer. Now, let us examine the perspective of the person on the other side of this dynamic, the person who is being manipulated by strategic weakness. Because they are not simply victims. They are participants. And understanding their role is crucial to understanding the full picture. Why do people fall for strategic weakness? Why do they allow themselves to be manipulated by someone who is clearly performing vulnerability? The answer is complex, but it often comes down to their own psychological needs. The person who is drawn to helping the apparently weak is often someone who needs to feel needed. They derive their sense of worth from being useful, from being the strong one, from being the savior. And the person who fakes weakness offers them this role. They provide an opportunity for the helper to feel important, to feel powerful, to feel like they are making a difference. But there's often something darker at play as well. The person who is drawn to the apparently weak is often someone who is threatened by actual strength. They are uncomfortable with equals. They do not want a partner or friend or colleague who challenges them, who might be smarter or more capable or more successful. They want someone they can feel superior to. And the person who fakes weakness provides this. They allow the helper to feel like the competent one, the together one, the one who has it all figured out. And this feeling is addictive. It becomes the foundation of the helper's identity. And so they enable the dynamic. They reward the weakness. They punish any displays of strength. Because if the weak person becomes strong, the helper loses their role, their purpose, their sense of superiority. This is why relationships built on strategic weakness are so stable. Both parties are getting what they need. Both parties are invested in maintaining the dynamic, and both parties will resist any change that threatens it. The apparently weak person will sabotage their own growth to maintain their position, and the apparently strong person will sabotage their partner's growth to maintain theirs. It is a perfect system of mutual manipulation, where both parties are using each other, and both parties are being used. And it can last for years, for decades, for entire lifetimes, with neither party ever acknowledging what is really happening. But what happens when one party wakes up? What happens when the person who has been faking weakness decides they want to be authentic? Or when the person who has been playing savior realizes they are being manipulated? This is when the system collapses. And the collapse is often ugly, because both parties have built their identities around the dynamic. To change it is to threaten who they are. And people will fight viciously to protect their identity, even when that identity is built on lies. The person who has been faking weakness and decides to stop will often be met with hostility from those who benefited from their performance. Their partner will accuse them of changing, of not being the person they fell in love with. Their boss will see them as suddenly difficult, as having an attitude problem. Their friend will feel betrayed, as if the authentic person is somehow less than the performed version. And the pressure to return to the mask will be enormous, because everyone around them has an investment in the performance. Everyone has organized their life around the role the person was playing, and they do not want that role to change. Similarly, the person who has been playing savior and realizes they are being manipulated will often be met with escalation from the person they were helping. The apparently weak person will have a crisis. They will become more needy, more desperate, more helpless. They will pull out every tool in their arsenal to re-establish the dynamic, because they are terrified. Their entire strategy for navigating the world is under threat. If they cannot be weak, if they cannot manipulate through vulnerability, who are they? How will they survive? And so they will fight to maintain the status quo, to pull the savior back into their role, to restore the comfortable lie that both parties have been living. These moments of rupture are painful, but also potentially transformative, because they force both parties to confront the truth of what has been happening. They create an opportunity for genuine change, for authentic relationship, for the possibility of connection based on truth, rather than manipulation. But that opportunity is rarely taken, because change is hard, truth is uncomfortable. And most people, when faced with a choice between a comfortable lie and an uncomfortable truth, will choose the lie. They will patch up the relationship. They will return to their roles. They will agree, implicitly or explicitly, to never speak of what was revealed. And the performance will continue, perhaps with slightly more self-awareness, perhaps with slightly more resentment, but it will continue nonetheless. Let us now examine the intergenerational transmission of this pattern, because strategic weakness is not just an individual strategy. It is often learned in childhood and passed down through families like a genetic inheritance. The child who watches their parent manipulate through weakness learns that this is how the world works. They learn that vulnerability is a weapon, that helplessness is power, that the way to get what you need is to appear to need more than you actually do. And they internalize this lesson so deeply that it becomes automatic, unconscious, part of their basic operating system for navigating relationships. Consider a family where the mother has mastered strategic weakness. She is perpetually overwhelmed, perpetually in need of help, perpetually on the verge of collapse. And the father and children organize their entire lives around managing her emotional state. They walk on eggshells. They anticipate her needs. They sacrifice their own desires to keep her stable. And the mother, whether consciously or not, maintains this dynamic through carefully calibrated displays of fragility. When the family starts to focus on something other than her, she has a crisis. When someone asserts their own needs, she becomes more helpless. When someone tries to leave or establish independence, she escalates to the point where leaving feels like abandonment, like cruelty, like something only a monster would do. The children in this family learn several lessons. They learn that their needs do not matter. They learn that their role is to take care of others. They learn that love is conditional on their willingness to sacrifice themselves. But they also learn something else. They learn that weakness is power. They watch their mother control the entire family through her apparent helplessness. They see that the person who appears most vulnerable is actually the one running the show. And some of them will reject this model. They will vow never to be like their mother. They will become fiercely independent, allergic to asking for help, determined to never manipulate through weakness. But others will internalize it. They will learn to replicate the pattern. And they will go out into the world and find partners and friends and colleagues who will play the complementary role, who will organize their lives around managing the apparently weak person's needs, just as the children's father did. And so the pattern repeats. Generation after generation, family after family, each person believing they are unique, that their situation is special, that their weakness is genuine, and their partner's strength is freely given, never recognizing that they are actors in a play that has been performed countless times before, reading from a script that was written long before they were born. But here is where it gets even more complex, because not everyone who learns this pattern uses it in the same way. Some people use strategic weakness defensively. They fake vulnerability to protect themselves, to avoid being hurt, to maintain control in situations where they feel powerless. But others use it offensively. They fake weakness to exploit others, to extract resources, to manipulate and control for the sheer pleasure of it. And the difference between these two types is crucial. Even though the behavior looks the same from the outside, the defensive user's strategic weakness is operating from fear. They have been hurt before. They have learned that showing their true strength makes them a target. They fake weakness not because they enjoy manipulating others, but because they believe it is necessary for survival. They feel guilty about it. They wish they could be authentic, but they are too afraid. And if you could somehow guarantee their safety, if you could convince them that they could be strong without being punished, many of them would drop the mask. They are trapped by their fear, not by their nature. But the offensive user's strategic weakness is different. They are operating from a place of contempt. They see other people as tools to be used, as resources to be extracted, as players in a game that exists for their entertainment. They fake weakness not out of fear, but out of strategy. They enjoy the manipulation. They take pleasure in the control. They feel superior to those they deceive, viewing them as weak and gullible and deserving of exploitation. And they have no interest in authenticity. The mask is not a burden to them. It is a source of power and pleasure. They would never drop it because they have no authentic self underneath. The mask is all there is. This is the difference between the neurotic and the psychopath. The neurotic fakes weakness because they are afraid. The psychopath fakes weakness because they are predatory. And while the behavior looks similar, the internal experience and the moral status are completely different. The neurotic deserves compassion. They are suffering. They are trapped in a pattern. They did not choose and do not know how to escape. But the psychopath deserves something else. Not hatred, perhaps because hatred is a waste of energy, but certainly wariness, certainly boundaries, certainly the recognition that they are dangerous and that engaging with them is a risk. The problem is that it is very difficult to tell these two types apart. Both will present as vulnerable. Both will tell stories of past trauma and current struggle. Both will elicit your compassion and your desire to help. The difference is in what happens over time. The neurotic, if you provide genuine safety and support, will eventually start to show their strength. They will begin to trust. They will take off the mask, slowly and tentatively, testing to see if you will punish them for it. And if you do not, if you accept and even celebrate their authentic power, they will continue to emerge. The relationship will become more balanced, more reciprocal, more real. But the psychopath will never emerge. No matter how much safety you provide, no matter how much support you offer, they will remain in the victim role because they are not actually afraid. They are not actually weak. They are performing, and the performance is working, and they have no reason to stop. In fact, if you start to pull back, if you start to assert your own needs or question the dynamic, they will escalate. They will have bigger crises. They will become more helpless. They will pull out every manipulation tactic in the book to re-establish control. And if that does not work, if you continue to resist, they will often suddenly reveal their true nature. The mask will drop, and you will see, perhaps for the first time, that the person you thought was weak and vulnerable is actually cold and calculating and has been playing you all along. This moment of revelation is traumatic for the person who has been manipulated because it forces them to confront the fact that everything they believed about the relationship was a lie. The person they thought they were helping was never actually helpless. The person they thought they were saving never actually needed saving. They were not the hero of the story. They were the mark. And this realization is devastating. It calls into question their judgment, their perception, their entire understanding of human nature. If they could be so wrong about this person, who else are they wrong about? Can they trust their own instincts? Can they trust anyone? This is a collateral damage of strategic weakness. When it is used offensively, it does not just harm the immediate victim. It harms their ability to trust, to connect, to be open to genuine vulnerability in the future. Because once you have been burned by someone faking weakness, you become suspicious of all displays of vulnerability. You start to see manipulation everywhere. You become cynical, guarded, unable to respond with compassion to people who might actually need help. The psychopath who fakes weakness does not just exploit their immediate target. They poison the well for everyone who comes after. They make the world a little bit colder, a little bit more suspicious, a little bit less willing to help those in genuine need. And this is why the cultural celebration of victimhood is so dangerous, because it creates an environment where faking weakness is not just effective but celebrated, where the person who claims the most oppression gets the most attention and resources, where vulnerability is currency and authenticity is irrelevant. And in this environment, the psychopaths thrive. They learn the language. They tell the right stories. They claim the right identities. And they use the genuine suffering of real victims as camouflage for their manipulation. They hide among the truly vulnerable, making it harder to distinguish real need from performed need, real trauma from strategic trauma, real victims from predators in victims' clothing. This does not mean we should stop helping people. It does not mean we should become cynical or withhold compassion. But it does mean we need to be smarter. We need to develop better discernment. We need to learn to distinguish between the person who is genuinely struggling and the person who is performing struggle for effect. And we need to be willing to set boundaries, to say no, to walk away from dynamics that are exploitative even when the person exploiting us is claiming to be a victim. This is hard because we have been taught that victims are always innocent, that vulnerability is always genuine, that to question someone's claim of suffering is to commit a moral violation. But this teaching, while well-intentioned, has created a system that is easily exploited. And the people who suffer most from this exploitation are not the cynics and the skeptics. They are the genuinely vulnerable people whose real needs get lost in the noise of performed vulnerability. They are the actual victims who find their experiences appropriated and weaponized by manipulators. They are the people who need help but cannot get it because resources have been diverted to those who are better at performing need. So what is the solution? How do we navigate a world where weakness can be both genuine and strategic, where vulnerability can be both authentic and performed, where the person asking for help might truly need it or might be manipulating you? The answer is not simple, but it starts with self-awareness. You need to understand your own psychology. You need to know why you are drawn to helping others. Is it genuine compassion? Or is it a need to feel superior, to feel needed, to avoid dealing with your own issues by focusing on someone else's? If it is the latter, you are vulnerable to manipulation, because the person who fakes weakness is looking for exactly this type of person. They can sense your need to be needed, and they will use it against you. You also need to pay attention to patterns rather than individual incidents. Anyone can have a crisis. Anyone can need help. But if someone is perpetually in crisis, if they always need help, if their problems never actually get resolved despite all your support, that is a red flag. It suggests that the crisis is not the problem. The crisis is the solution. It is how they maintain control, how they keep you engaged, how they avoid having to be responsible for their own life. And you need to be willing to see this. Even when it is uncomfortable, even when it makes you feel like a bad person for doubting them, you need to set boundaries and observe how the person responds. A genuinely vulnerable person will respect your boundaries. They might be disappointed. They might be hurt, but they will accept that you have limits, that you have needs, that you cannot sacrifice yourself indefinitely. But the person who is faking weakness will not accept your boundaries. They will see boundaries as rejection, as abandonment, as proof that you never really cared. They will escalate. They will have a bigger crisis. They will make you feel guilty for having needs of your own. And this response tells you everything you need to know. It tells you that the relationship is not about mutual support. It is about them extracting resources from you. And you need to be willing to walk away, even when it feels cruel, even when they're telling you that you are killing them by leaving, even when every instinct in your body is screaming at you to stay and help. This is perhaps the hardest thing, because walking away from someone who claims to need you feels like a moral violation. It feels like you are abandoning them in their time of need. But here's what you need to understand. You cannot help someone who does not want to be helped. You cannot save someone who is invested in remaining a victim. And by continuing to provide resources and attention and emotional labor to someone who is manipulating you, you are not helping them. You are enabling them. You are reinforcing the pattern. You are teaching them that their strategy works, that faking weakness gets them what they want, that they never need to change or grow or take responsibility for their own life. And you are also harming yourself. You are depleting your own resources. You are neglecting your own needs. You are teaching yourself that your value lies in your usefulness to others, that you do not deserve relationships based on reciprocity and mutual respect, that love means sacrifice and suffering and the endless subordination of your own needs to someone else's demands. So walking away is not cruelty. It is self-preservation. It is a recognition that you cannot set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, especially when that someone else is perfectly capable of generating their own heat, but has discovered that it is easier to steal yours. And it is also, paradoxically, the most helpful thing you can do for the person who is manipulating you. Because as long as their strategy works, they will never change. As long as they can get what they want through performed weakness, they will never develop genuine strength. By walking away, by refusing to play the game, you are forcing them to confront the consequences of their behavior. You are creating the possibility, however small, that they might recognize the pattern and choose to change. Most will not. Most will simply find a new target, a new person to manipulate, a new relationship to exploit. But a small percentage, will hit bottom. They will run out of people willing to be used. And in that moment of isolation and desperation, they might finally be willing to look at themselves honestly, to see the mask they have been wearing, to consider the possibility of living differently. But that is their journey, not yours. Your responsibility is not to save them. Your responsibility is to yourself, to your own integrity, to your own well-being. And that means being willing to see manipulation for what it is, even when it is dressed up as vulnerability. It means being willing to say no, even when saying no feels cruel. It means being willing to walk away, even when walking away feels like abandonment, because the alternative is to sacrifice yourself on the altar of someone else's dysfunction. And that is not love. That is not compassion. That is not help. That is just two people drowning together instead of one. Now let us return to the person who wears the mask, because we have spent much time examining the impact of their behavior on others. but we have not fully explored the impact on themselves. And this is crucial, because the person who fakes weakness is not just harming others. They are harming themselves in ways that are profound and often irreversible. The first harm is to their sense of self. When you spend years or decades pretending to be someone you are not, you lose touch with who you actually are. The mask becomes the face. The performance becomes the identity. And you reach a point where you can no longer distinguish between what you genuinely feel and what you are performing. Are you actually anxious, or are you performing anxiety because it gets you attention? Are you actually struggling, or are you performing struggle because it gives you power? Are you actually weak, or are you performing weakness because it keeps you safe? These questions become unanswerable because a performance has been going on for so long, has been so consistent, has been so rewarded, that it has literally rewired your brain. The neural pathways associated with authentic emotion have atrophied. The pathways associated with strategic emotion have become superhighways, and you have lost the ability to access your genuine self, assuming there even is a genuine self left to access. The second harm is to your relationships. When you build relationships on deception, those relationships cannot nourish you. They cannot meet your real needs because no one knows what your real needs are. They are responding to the mask, not to you. And so you are perpetually lonely, even when surrounded by people. You are perpetually unseen, even when you are the center of attention. You are perpetually disconnected, even when you are in intimate relationships, because intimacy requires authenticity. It requires being known, and you cannot be known when you are always performing. The third harm is to your development. When you fake weakness, you never develop genuine strength. You never learn to solve your own problems, to regulate your own emotions, to stand on your own feet. You remain perpetually dependent on others, not because you actually need them, but because your entire strategy is built on appearing to need them. And this prevents you from growing, from maturing, from becoming a fully realized adult. You remain stuck in a kind of psychological adolescence, always looking for someone to take care of you, always avoiding responsibility, always blaming your problems on external circumstances or other people. And the years pass and you get older, but you do not get wiser or stronger or more capable. You just get better at manipulating, more sophisticated in your performance, more entrenched in your pattern. The fourth harm is to your sense of agency. When you position yourself as weak, as helpless, as a victim of circumstances beyond your control, you are giving away your power. You are telling yourself and the world that you are not capable of changing your situation, that you are at the mercy of forces larger than yourself, that you need others to save you. And this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you believe you are helpless, you will not take action to help yourself. You will wait for rescue. And while you are waiting, your situation will often get worse, which will confirm your belief in your own helplessness, which will make you even less likely to take action. It is a vicious cycle that can trap you for your entire life. And the fifth harm, perhaps the most profound, is to your soul. This is not a religious statement. This is about the core of who you are, the part of you that knows truth from lies, right from wrong, authentic from performed. When you live a lie, when you manipulate others, when you use vulnerability as a weapon, something inside you knows. Your conscious mind might rationalize it, might justify it, might tell you that you are just doing what you need to do to survive. But at a deeper level, you know, and that knowledge creates a kind of spiritual sickness, a sense of being fundamentally wrong, fundamentally corrupt, fundamentally unworthy of love or respect or happiness. And this sickness manifests in various ways: depression, anxiety, addiction, self-sabotage, a pervasive sense of emptiness and meaninglessness, the feeling that no matter what you achieve or acquire, it is never enough. It never fills a hole. It never makes you feel whole. This is the price of the mask, and it is a price that compounds over time. The longer you wear it, the higher the price becomes, until eventually you reach a point where the cost of continuing to wear the mask is unbearable, but the cost of removing it seems even worse. Because to remove the mask is to lose everything you have built: your relationships, your career, your identity, your entire way of navigating the world. It is to admit that you've been lying to yourself and to everyone else for years or decades. It is to face the shame and the guilt and the grief of all the time you wasted, all the connections you destroyed, all the potential you squandered. It is to start over from zero, with no guarantee that you can even find your authentic self after all this time, with no guarantee that anyone will accept or love the real you if you do manage to find it. And so most people do not remove the mask. They cannot. The cost is too high, and they live out their lives in a kind of quiet desperation, successful perhaps by external measures, but internally empty, disconnected, alone. They die having never been truly known, having never experienced genuine intimacy, having never discovered who they actually were beneath all the performance. And this is the ultimate tragedy of strategic weakness. It works. It gets you what you think you want. But what you think you want is not what you actually need. And by the time you realize this, it is often too late. But it does not have to be this way. There's another path. It is harder. It is riskier. It requires more courage than most people possess. But it is possible. And it starts with a simple but terrifying decision. The decision to be seen. Not the performed version of yourself. Not the strategic mask. But the actual you, with all your strength and all your flaws, all your competence and all your uncertainty, all your power and all your genuine vulnerability. This decision is terrifying because it means giving up control. When you wear a mask, you control how others see you. You manage their perceptions. You manipulate their responses. But when you show up authentically, you have no control. People see you as you are, and they might not like what they see. They might reject you. They might judge you. They might use your genuine vulnerability against you in ways that your strategic vulnerability never allowed. This is a risk, and it is a real risk. Not everyone deserves to see your authentic self. Not every environment is safe for authenticity. And part of wisdom is learning to discern when and where and with whom you can be real. But here is what happens when you do find those people and those places. When you do take the risk of being authentic, something shifts. The relationships that form are different. They are deeper. They are more nourishing. They are based on truth rather than manipulation. And you discover something surprising. You discover that you are more lovable as your authentic self than you ever were as your performed self. Because authentic connection is more satisfying than strategic connection. Being truly seen is more fulfilling than being strategically admired. And the people who love the real you, flaws and all, are more valuable than the people who love the mask. You also discover that you are stronger than you thought, that you do not need to fake weakness to survive, that you can handle rejection, criticism, conflict, that you can stand on your own feet, that you can solve your own problems, that you can regulate your own emotions, that you are, in fact, capable and competent and powerful. And this realization is liberating because it means you are no longer dependent on others for your sense of self. You are no longer trapped in the exhausting cycle of performing and manipulating and controlling. You can simply be, and being, it turns out, is much easier than performing. But getting to this point requires work. It requires therapy or deep self-reflection, or some kind of process that allows you to examine your patterns, understand where they came from, and make conscious choices about whether to continue them. It requires grieving the time you lost, the relationships you damaged, the person you might have been if you had not spent so much energy on the mask. It requires forgiving yourself for the harm you caused, to yourself and others, while also taking responsibility for that harm and committing to doing better. And it requires courage. More courage than faking weakness ever did. Because faking weakness is actually the coward's path. It is the path of avoiding risk, of maintaining control, of never having to face the possibility of genuine rejection. But authenticity is the brave path. It is the path of vulnerability, of uncertainty, of trusting that you are enough as you are, without the mask, without the performance, without the manipulation. And most people are not brave enough to walk this path. They would rather stay safe in their prison than risk freedom. They would rather be powerful and alone than vulnerable and connected. They would rather win the game than question whether the game is worth playing. But for those who do choose the brave path, for those who do decide to remove the mask and show up authentically, the rewards are profound, not external rewards necessarily. You might not be more successful in conventional terms, You might not make more money or achieve higher status or win more admiration, but you will be more alive. You will be more present. You will be more connected. You will experience the full range of human emotion, not just the strategic emotions you perform for effect. You will have relationships that nourish your soul, not just relationships that serve your agenda. You will know who you are, not just who you pretend to be. And you will be able to look at yourself in a mirror without flinching, without shame, without the gnawing sense that you are fundamentally fraudulent. This is a choice that everyone who wears a mask of weakness must eventually make. Continue performance and maintain the power, but lose yourself in the process. Or drop the mask and risk everything but gain the possibility of genuine life, genuine connection, genuine self. There's no right answer. Or rather, the right answer depends on what you value, what you are willing to sacrifice, what you believe life is for. But it is a choice. And pretending it is not a choice, pretending you have no option but to continue performance, is itself a form of strategic weakness. It is a way of avoiding responsibility for your own life, for your own choices, for your own soul. So, let us end where we began, in the theater that never closes, on the stage where everyone is performing, and no one is quite sure where performance ends and reality begins. You are in this theater right now. You are on this stage, and you are wearing a mask. Maybe it is the mask of weakness. Maybe it is the mask of strength. Maybe it is some other mask entirely. But you are wearing one. Everyone is. The question is not whether you wear a mask. The question is whether you know you are wearing it. Whether you chose it consciously or inherited it unconsciously. Whether it serves you or imprisons you. Whether you could take it off if you wanted to. And whether you want to. These are not easy questions. They do not have easy answers. But they are the questions that matter. They are the questions that determine whether you live an authentic life or performed life, whether you experience genuine connection or strategic isolation, whether you die having been truly known or having been perpetually hidden. And they are questions that only you can answer. No one can answer them for you. No one can remove your mask for you. No one can force you to be authentic. That is a choice you must make yourself. And it is the most important choice you will ever make. But before you make that choice, understand what you're choosing. Understand the full cost of the mask and the full cost of removing it, because both paths have costs. Both paths require sacrifice. The mask costs you your authenticity, your genuine relationships, your self-knowledge, your soul. But removing the mask costs you your safety, your control, your strategic advantages, your carefully constructed identity. And you need to count both costs honestly before you decide which price you are willing to pay. If you choose to keep the mask, do so consciously. Acknowledge what you're doing. Recognize that you are trading authenticity for safety, connection for control, genuine life for strategic survival, and accept the consequences of that trade. Do not lie to yourself about it. Do not pretend you are a victim with no choice. You have a choice. You are making it. And you are responsible for it. Own it. And if the cost becomes too high, if the loneliness becomes unbearable, if the emptiness becomes too much, remember that you can always choose differently. The mask is not permanent. It can be removed. It will be hard. It will be painful. But it is possible, and it is never too late. If you choose to remove the mask, do so carefully. Do not announce it to the world. Do not make a dramatic gesture. Start small. Find one person, one safe person, and show them a glimpse of your authentic self. See how they respond. If they accept you, show them more. Build trust slowly. Expand your circle of authenticity gradually. And be prepared for some people to reject you. Be prepared for some relationships to end. Because not everyone wants authenticity. Not everyone can handle it. Some people need you to wear the mask because your mask supports their mask. And when you remove yours, their entire structure becomes unstable. They will try to get you to put it back on. And if you refuse, they will leave. Let them. They were never really with you anyway. They were with a mask. And you deserve people who are with you, the real you, not the performed you. And as you remove the mask, be patient with yourself. You have been performing for a long time. The authentic self does not emerge overnight. It takes time to remember who you are, to reconnect with your genuine feelings, to learn to trust your own perceptions. You will make mistakes. You will sometimes slip back into performance. You will sometimes doubt whether authenticity is worth it. This is normal. This is part of the process. Do not judge yourself for it. Just notice it, and gently, persistently, keep choosing authenticity. Keep choosing truth. Keep choosing to be seen. And gradually, over time, the authentic self will strengthen. The mask will loosen. And you will discover that you can live without it. That you can be powerful without faking weakness. That you can be safe without hiding your strength. That you can be loved without performing vulnerability. This is a journey from strategic weakness to authentic power. From performed vulnerability to genuine strength. From the mask to the face. And it is a journey worth taking. Not because it is easy. It is not easy. Not because it is safe. It is not safe, but because it is real. And real, in the end, is all that matters. Real connection, real emotion, real life, not the performance of life, not the strategic simulation of connection, but the actual thing, the genuine article, the truth beneath all the lies we tell ourselves and each other. And so we arrive at the end of this exploration. We have examined the phenomenon of strategic weakness from every angle. We have looked at how it works, why it works, who uses it, who enables it, what it costs, and what alternatives exist. We have told stories of people trapped in this pattern and people who have escaped it. We have explored the psychology, the neuroscience, the cultural context, the moral dimensions. We have tried to understand without judging, to analyze without condemning, to see the full complexity of human behavior in all its contradictions and ambiguities. And what have we learned? We have learned that human beings are complicated, that we are capable of both tremendous authenticity and tremendous deception, that we can be both victim and villain, both manipulated and manipulator, both sincere and strategic, that the line between genuine vulnerability and performed vulnerability is often blurry, even to the person experiencing it, that the masks we wear to protect ourselves often end up imprisoning us, that the strategies we use to gain power often cost us our souls, that the game we think we are winning is often the game that is destroying us. But we have also learned that change is possible. That awareness is the first step toward freedom, that the mask can be removed, even if it has been worn for decades. That authentic connection is available to those brave enough to risk it. That genuine strength is more powerful than strategic weakness. That being real, while terrifying, is also liberating. That the prison we have built for ourselves is a door, and the door is unlocked, and we can walk out anytime we choose. The question is whether we will choose, whether we will have the courage to see ourselves honestly, to acknowledge the masks we wear, to count the cost of our strategies, to consider the possibility of living differently, whether we will continue to play the game or step off the stage, whether we will remain actors in performance or become authors of our own authentic lives. This is not a question I can answer for you. This is not a choice I can make for you. This is your life, your mask, your choice. And whatever you decide, you will have to live with the consequences. So choose wisely, choose consciously, choose with full awareness of what you are choosing and why. And whatever you choose, own it. Take responsibility for it. Do not blame others. Do not claim you had no choice. You always have a choice. Even when the choices are all bad, you still get to choose which bad you prefer. And that choice, that agency, that responsibility is what makes you human. Not the mask, not the performance, but the choice, the awareness, the willingness to look at yourself honestly and decide who you want to be. And so the curtain falls on this act, but the show continues inside each of us in the silence of our thoughts. The mask we have analyzed today, you may know it well, you may wear it, or perhaps you see it in someone you love. The comment section below is not a place for judgment. It is our stage for confessions, a safe space for observers. Use that space to share your story. What mask did you have to wear to survive? We want to hear from you. And if you felt understood here, subscribe, because here you're not alone. Together, we will keep unraveling human theater, one mask at a time. The next act is about to begin.